Welcome, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us today for this session. Sorry for the slight delay. My name is Odelia Boker, and I will be your moderator today. Today, we are presenting advocacy for women in the workspace, or sorry, in the workplace. Address change, advance your career. It will be an interactive session or discussion led by Nancy Wang, founder and CEO of Awit, general manager at AWS. So I'll read the housekeeping just before we get started. All attendees will be muted throughout this session. So if you have any questions during the presentation, feel free to type them in the Q&A box in your Zoom control panel. And we will do our best to answer all the questions at the end of the presentation. And in the event that we run out of time, we'll be sure to follow up with responses to any question we need to get to. And now I'd like to take a moment to introduce with great pleasure our speaker for today, Nancy Wang, founder and board chair of Awit. Nancy, a short intro. I'll take the opportunity to introduce you. So Nancy Wang is a general manager at AWS, where she leads P&L, product, engineering, and design for its data protection and governance businesses. Prior to Amazon, she led SaaS product development at Rubrik, the fastest growing enterprise software unicorn, and built healthdata.gov for the US Department of Health and Human Services. Nancy is passionate about advancing more women into technical roles. She's the founder and board chair of Advancing Women in Tech, a global nonprofit with over 16,000 members spanning 3 continents. Thank you so much for joining us, Nancy. I must say that your bio is impressive. And before we dive into the general session, I'd love to hear a bit more about Awit, if that's all right.
Yeah, absolutely. And thanks so much for pulling up the slides. Great intro, Dalia, and so happy to be here with the Crowdvocate team and the audience today. When I was this morning thinking about what really defines what I'm going to share with you all today for International Women's Day 2022, I thought back to the Advancing Women in Tech, or Awit mission, which is as women in tech, right? A lot of us are often the only in the room, or folks who feel very alone, right? Because especially if you're in technical leadership roles, just look at the stats. There's just not that many of us. So how do we ensure a future, right? A future reality where that's not the status quo? And so that's really the core and the heart of the Awit mission, which is helping women and underrepresented groups advance their career through upskilling. So making sure that you have the right skills and the right resources to help you get to that next level. And secondly, with executive mentorship, which is making sure that you have the right mentors, the right sponsors to help you succeed when you have opportunities to get to that next level. So that, in short, is the Awit mission. So if you look at, what are some of the resources that you can check out online to partake. So of course, starting out with our skills-based training. So these trainings were developed from leaders from Google, from AWS, from other very notable female founder startups like Coffee Mates Bagel, for example. She's a good friend of mine, Arum Kong, right? But all of these leaders have combined together to create some trainings that combine real-world experiences, but also applicable skills. And so we're proud to have 2 specializations, each 4 courses long, that cover fundamentals in cloud product management. So after taking our courses, you can directly go and take the exam to be AWS Cloud Practitioner Certified, as well as real-world product management, which in short is frankly my rubric for how I look to hire new product managers for AWS. In addition to that, we've also worked with various companies such as MongoDB, venture capital firms to put together executive mentorship programs that help young executives or new executives grow into their roles and also pair them up one by one to a seasoned executive mentor. So through these two pillars, we want to advance more women into promotions, into senior leadership roles, into, for example, major significant raises in their salaries, and through all of that, create a more equitable future.
Thanks so much, Nancy. And now I guess that we've set the stage for, what advocacy means today in a larger context. I'd like to kind of narrow the focus and show how elements of what you just presented can be applied to self-advocacy and specifically, and ultimately be leveraged into growth in your own career. And so what I feel like asking you, Nancy, is, you've got such an impressive personal, such an impressive career. If you can take us back, we'd like to hear more about your personal experiences and how did advocacy actually play a part in your personal journey with growing into the leadership position that you hold today.
Sure. So take you guys all the way back to the beginning. So a lot of folks think I, grew up on the West Coast, right? Because in many ways, I'm outdoorsy. I love tech. I'm probably your definition of a tech employee. But no, I actually grew up close to farming town in rural Wisconsin. And why I share that story is, this morning I was speaking to actually a group of senior women leaders from, Microsoft, from SAP. And it's important because this year's theme, especially, right, is breaking the bias, which in a large part means shattering expectations and breaking the ceiling. So growing up in rural Wisconsin, not a lot of resources, right? People hadn't even really heard of Ivy League universities. So going through that journey, right, and achieving things that frankly were outside of most people's expectations, I feel like that in a large part has contributed to this feeling of fearlessness, right, that a lot of people would describe me of, right, which is really believing and being confident in yourself that even if you don't have the answers right now, right, you have the mental framework and the ability to figure out the answers. And so if you also look at my career, and this is also something else that I like to share with the audience, is it's not a straight shot, right? It was not I went into engineering and I became an engineer and I grew up through the ranks and I'm here where I am today. It was very much a meandering path, right? If you think about different, arcs or different paths, absolutely, right? My career was definitely a zigzag. I started out in the US government, right? As Adalia mentioned, working for the US Health and Human Services Department, right? Building health.gov. Why? Because I'm really passionate about helping the community, right? And social impact has been a theme that has really resonated with me throughout my career. So whether it's helping people access critical healthcare data, or these days, right, through advancing women in technology and helping women get promotions and salary raises, however I can impact, right? That's really what I want to define my career and define my legacy with.
Amazing. So I feel like, I feel very privileged tonight, not just because I'm with you and moderating this session, but also because as the VP of Marketing for Crowdvocate, we are actually a company that makes a point to elevate women and give them a seat at the table in important decisions. And we're really, on our way to gender equality. We're still an early, what's called an early stage startup. But I think even though that's the situation, having almost half of the Crowdvocate workforce is female, and 40% of the management being female is already kind of, I think, an impressive, achievement. And and Gal Biorana, our CEO, who also made it a point to stay backstage tonight and let us kind of lead that session. He did want to share with us all his thoughts around gender equality, and I'll just read his statement because I think it's powerful. At Crowdvocate, we make sure that women have a voice and seat at the table in every aspect of business, and we're proud of having, as I said, 49% female workforce in a tech startup, and that 40% of our management team are women leaders. And there are many benefits for diversity and women leadership. And for Gal specifically, I think that one of them is market alignment. I believe that part of being a CMA stands for Customer Marketing Advocacy vendor, is aligning with our passionate and women-led domain. So we make sure that we have not only a diverse, but also a female perspective in every department and team internally. And I think, that's really, really something that we were very, very proud of. And just, on piggybacking on what you shared with us from your personal experience, I think I'd like to introduce questions that are top 25 customer marketing and advocacy strategists have shared with us. And I'll start with actually a question asked by Jenny Saba, who is the Senior Manager of Community Engagement and Advocacy at Jamf, sorry. And Jenny's asking, what's the one thing that now you wish you would have known at the beginning of your career? And I think it's, you already took us back to the very, very beginning, but then if you can kind of condense it to, one tip that you would have been happy to get earlier on.
Sure. And first off, I just wanted to say to Gal's quote, that's wonderful, right? Seeing such a diverse employee, workforce is super important, and recognizing that it is really important to the ethos of the company to have equal voice and representation for women at your leadership table. Kudos to you, Gal. So that's why I'm super honored to be here, and thanks for having me. To Jenny's first question, right? What's one thing I wish I knew? Honestly, at this point in my career, everything's about who you know, right? And I know that sounds so cliche, but it's really true. In fact, actually, at this point, I'm going through the process of interviewing for board of director roles at private and public companies. And it really boils down to who you know and also how you pitch yourself. So when I was younger, right, and this goes back to how we think about ourselves, right? Oh, I'm good at this and I'm good at that. And you want to list as many things as possible. In fact, as you get older or, more experience in your career, you actually want to list as few things as possible, but be really, really good at those things, right? For example, I can name 3 things off the list, right? Which is, building high growth businesses, right? Building communities. And third is, in the data protection space, right? Building businesses there. That's it, right? So I would say when I was younger, the focus is being well-rounded, right? Being good at a lot of things. As you get more experienced, your value actually comes from being good at a few things, but being really, really good at them.
Yeah, I think I not only agree, but I think, when you say it only comes down to who you know, it only comes down to also to the people, right? Because at the end of the day, the more you progress in your career, the more you're going to manage people, and the way you are able to build trust with your team is actually what's going to take you further. And I love a quote that I read from a chief people officer in a very large company, who said, you only rise by pushing others, and that's so very true. So yeah, great insight there. Thank you, Nancy. And I think with the change in the landscape over the last few years, I think it presents a lot of insight, but to where the gaps in the workplace are, but also highlights the, often the lack of resources to implement change. And so I kind of feel like asking, what are some of the strategies for creating a sense of urgency and relaying the significance of identified challenges? Could you share that with us?
Sure. So just to clarify, identify challenges meaning challenges, right, or gaps that we're facing in DEI. Yeah. So from that angle, it's so awesome to see many companies, Accenture being one of them, that has published public stats on what is the percentage of women and men that they have in their workforce, but also what is the percentage of women to men that they have in leadership roles. So visibility and awareness, transparency, is the first step to solving the problem, because at least you know where your baseline is. And from there, in terms of resources, well, it comes down to really putting your mouth where the problem is, which is, well, if you set goals, right, and aggressive goals for yourself on the makeup, right, or the inclusion percentage of your workforce, well, then it's incumbent upon yourself, as well as the leaders that you manage, to make sure that happens. So whether that's making sure that your interview panels are more diverse as a function, or it's whether, for every position, for example, this is what I do, is I try to have at least one woman or underrepresented candidate in the final rounds, right, to make it an equitable decision for the role, right? That's how you move the needle forward. And finally, right, doing retrospectives every year of, okay, how well did I do, right, against my goals? Did I actually accomplish what I set forth to do this year in terms of my D&I objectives?
So you really manage it as a project on its own, right?
Absolutely, right? And that's really how you operationalize it, right? And that's honestly the mission of Awit isn't so much, okay, let's create maybe events, or let's create sort of these social gatherings, but more so, okay, how do we put our mission into practice, right? We say we want to educate women, right? How many women have gone through our trainings? I mean, thus far, over 25,000, right, gone through our Coursera offerings, for example. And that's really where you hold yourself accountable to, did you achieve the goals that you set out?
Yeah. So far we're talking about the angle, the perspective of how can we help female in the workplace, but I think some of the questions, and I'll jump straight into Leslie Barrett's question, who is Leslie is the director of customer marketing and advocacy at Sendoso, and she's asking, I think a question that puzzles a lot of us, especially in our younger ages. What are 3 action items women in tech can start taking to ensure they are tracking towards a promotion or gaining visibility inside the organization? So part of the work that needs to be done comes from above, but I think from within each one of us, there's probably so much we can do to get better, at advocating for ourselves. Any insights on that?
Yeah, absolutely. As women, right, we're taught at a young age to be modest, right? I mean, I certainly remember from my parents. And so it's not a surprise then for us as adult professionals to almost shy away from, let's say, tooting our own horn, right? Or as more folks will call it, bragging about yourself. But obviously there's a fine line, right, between being proud of your accomplishments and actually bragging about yourself. And the way I've operationalized it at work is I have a promotion document, in fact, for every one of my employees. And that's one thing I will guarantee, which is then it's very transparent exactly where you stand, right? Sure, it might be easier to do in bigger companies where things are a little bit more structured, right? Typically, you take a company, Google, Amazon, wherever, right? Is each level is very well mapped out of, you need to have this level influence, this, for example, project scope, so on and so forth. And so we map it out for every one of my employees, regardless of what level they are. Right. And so that way the employee knows where they stand. That way the manager knows, okay, here are their strengths, and this is how we grow them. So this goes back to then as an employee, how do you advocate for yourself? Is a couple ways, right? One is, it's also your prerogative to make sure that that document is up to date, includes your latest accomplishments, but it also gives you a foundation. So for example, oftentimes, whether it's a emergency project or a high visibility project that is very time sensitive, well, those are the stretch opportunities that can define a career, right? So for example, the reason I'm in the position I'm in was that I took a stretch goal, right? Stretch goal is why I am the GM of AWS Data Protection, right, currently. And so for women who want to advocate for themselves, right, of this is why I'm the right person to take on this stretch project. Well, if you pull up your promotion document, right, your accomplishments speak for themselves. And it's less of, well, let me tell you why I'm great, but rather let me show you why I'm great, right? And it becomes a dialogue of show and not tell. And so that's my biggest advice, especially as someone who prefers not to talk about herself in public. That would be my advice.
I can totally relate as someone who immigrated, from France, where I grew up, and moved to Israel and then to the UK. I mean, I moved a lot, but what you're talking about show me, don't tell me. I had, the greatest degree from one of the greatest places in universities in France. But once you move to a new country, no one knows that place, and then you have to prove yourselves, and you prove yourself by doing, and that's very true. I think well, no matter what the size of the organization is, actually. Right. So let's move on with our next question. I must say, we were bombarded with it's a hot topic. I mean, we were bombarded with questions. So I'll move on to Meg Hewer. I hope I pronounced it well, Meg, and apologize if not. Meg is the VP of Strategic Initiatives at Winning by Design. And her question is, it's often challenging for women leaders to access advice and mentoring on navigating change or developing skills as they get into more senior roles. This includes how to be a great mentor or sponsor to others. How can we help more women gain mid and late career advice?
Well, this is a topic I think of a lot. Obviously, as Awit puts on executive mentorship programs, and our commitment to these executives. So for example, we recently ran a program, as I mentioned, at MongoDB, where the participants were not just entry level, right, but they were directors, senior directors, and I believe we had 1 or 2 VPs in the program. So if you're going to find one-on-one mentors for folks of that seniority level, how do you do that? And that goes into involving the male allies. So for example, folks like Gal here, right, is if you look at the very, very top levels, because there aren't that many women, if you only limit yourself to women mentors, well, frankly, that's not a large sample size, right? So opening yourself up to male allies as well, who are interested in sponsoring and mentoring you. And I've been super fortunate to have a lot of those in addition to women mentors. 2, especially at the mid and late career stages, time gets very limited, right? And I'm not just talking about time that you spend at work. Well, as women, that's typically where women start families, maybe even later on in their career, they need to take care of elderly family members or sick family members, whatever it might be, right? Our time gets very limited. So often these days, what I ask of folks who reach out to me to get mentored is, how could I help you, right? Because the last thing I want to do is also jump on a call and be like, I can't really help you with your problem, right? I'm not the right person. I feel bad, and you probably felt like it was a waste of time, right? So let's make sure that we meet ourselves in the middle of finding, let's say, the right mentor. So if you're maybe a director, right, finding a senior director, finding a VP, maybe someone at the C level might be a little bit too far removed, right, from the problems that you're looking to solve. So being strategic about who you reach out to be your mentor is also part of the equation. So you get real advice, and both of you feel like you're advancing one another.
I love that word of ally that you brought up. I think, the conversation of allyship is a very important topic, and we're seeing more and more in the workplace day to day. And I think that we know that, for change to be successful, not only is strong leadership critical, but also support and influence across areas in department. That's the one skill that I think women probably need to get better at, is kind of, in the same way that we can juggle so many things outside of the workplace, do the same and kind of reach out to people that are not in our department, not in our direct reach. Do you have feedback on, building a culture of allies and strategies for elevating the group voice into having a greater impact on cultural shift, really?
Absolutely. I mean, and actually what you just mentioned, Ellie, is super important because, again, going back to what society has traditionally taught us as women is obviously be demure, be modest, right? Just focus on your work and do a good job, and people will reward you, or people will notice, right, what you've achieved. Sadly, sometimes that's not always true. And maybe it's because, let's say, just like we have moved companies, right, and changed careers in our history, your manager might too, right? And if your assumption is, well, I'm going to focus on doing my job really well, not networking outside, and my boss will notice. Well, what if your boss takes another job, right? And that it's very true in today's economy, where I'm seeing a ton of movement, right? In tech, for example, a ton of people taking new jobs, internal transfers, outside people coming in, people going outside. I mean, this is, I would say, not so much the age of great resignation. This is the age of great mobility, if anything, right? People are just changing jobs. So what that all means is, again, going back to self-advocacy and making sure that you're building your network, right? Your network is for you. So for example, the network that I've been very fortunate to build over the years with Awit, with my time at Google, with my time at startups, now AWS, that's something that you can take with you, right, to your next role, to wherever company you might be at next, because those people are there for you, not so much for your role. So that's just something to keep in mind, is continue building your personal network and your personal brand, no matter where you might be.
Yeah, I can share. I've personally seen, lots of people, regardless of, women or men, by the way, in larger companies that had built their entire, promotion or progression in the company, relying on one single sponsor or ally. And suddenly, as you said, this person might decide to leave and move to another company. And suddenly all these efforts, go down the drain, and very talented people suddenly lose visibility, lose credibility, lose everything. And spreading that network as wide as possible is, I think, an important topic. Thanks for that. Okay, so moving on. Again, I'm being conscious of time as well, and we still have lots of questions. So another of our great questions comes from another top 25 CMA influencers, Cynthia Hester, the director of global customer programs at Google. And Cynthia asks the next question: what actions or changes do you see that give you hope for women's equality in tech, for technical and non-technical roles, especially for women of color who lag behind their white peers in pay, access to C-suite positions, and leadership role in general?
Yeah, and that goes back to my prior point on visibility and awareness. So for example, very recently, one exercise that we did during our annual performance management process is not just look at, okay, what is the distribution of, we have performance ratings, right? That's a standard practice, I think, across startups and big companies, but performance ratings across the entire population, but also performance ratings specific to gender and specific to ethnicity. Why? Because do we expect a standard distribution, or do we expect maybe a skewed distribution? Or if the distribution was not what we expected, which means skewed to the left or skewed to the right, what are the causes for that, right? Are we viewing everyone's performance colorblind and genderblind, right? And it's a very real way to look at ourselves and to assess ourselves and see, are there people falling through the cracks? And this is, I know COVID and pandemic has brought us many comforts, right? Much mobility in the way that we work. For example, I love to travel, and I have certainly been taking advantage of being able to work remotely from places like Mexico or Canada or so on and so forth. One of the downsides, though, and I realized this, right, which is a very significant downside, especially for junior women, women of color, women, for example, who just enter the workforce, it's not such a great time, right? They feel isolated. They feel like they can't reach out to leaders or they can't reach out to mentors because, look, if the only way you've interacted with me is through a video camera, you're not going to know that I like cats, I'm goofy, and I'll probably take you up on your offer for a margarita. Like, you're not going to know that, right? All you're going to know is Nancy, right, who does XYZ. And that's not the way to build a personal work relationship. So that's really where I feel like this population is at risk for falling behind. And so to that question, right, which is, what gives me hope? What gives me hope is that we are taking steps at looking at numbers. And I know, Amazon's not the only company to do this. I've heard my friends at Meta, at Salesforce say this as well, is if we're able to look at ourselves critically around numbers and again, see how well we stack up, right? As well as additionally funding programs to bring more of these diverse individuals in. So for example, one of the programs that I'm personally investing in, as well as investing Amazon dollars, is bringing women and underrepresented groups from the Masters of CS program that focuses on people who have never gotten an engineering degree from Penn Engineering into AWS, right? Mentoring them on the way, getting them full-time roles in software development. That's a great way to focus on population that otherwise may have challenges, right? Challenges getting in the door. So all of that to say, increase awareness, transparency, and also sponsorship and funding in this area is what we need to solve the problem.
Amazing. Yeah, and there's so much work to do there.
Exactly. I mean, we just scratched the surface. I know at Grace Hopper a couple years ago, we were talking about equity in 2050. I mean, that's a great goal, but to really get there, I mean, we're already 2022. So, it's only two and a half more decades, right? To really have that impact in 2.5 more decades, especially when you chart out how long it takes, let's say, a new graduate to become a director, to become a VP, right? We got to start now, right? Yeah. It starts now.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great point. It brings me to our next question. This person chose to remain anonymous, and we'll obviously respect that. She's also one of our top 25 CMA influencers. And the question is, as a woman in a competitive tech industry post the Me Too movement, how would you advise others to strike the right balance between highlighting their accomplishments and their gender when seeking career opportunities, negotiating in business, and gaining recognition?
Yeah, absolutely. So I might take a contrarian view. So whoever asked that question, feel free to DM me offline. I'm more than happy to have a conversation on this. So whenever I actually introduce myself, for professional roles, right? I actually don't want to be known as, oh, Nancy, the woman leader, right? I should be a leader in my own right. It doesn't matter if I'm a woman or not a woman, right? Sure, as a woman, right, it helps to be a role model for other women to know that it is possible. But I actually don't want my male peers to say, oh, she's good for a woman, right? What does that even mean? Does that mean I have a lower bar than my male peers? Because when that happens, right, the sort of the double standard, that's actually where the movement loses credibility, because then folks can say, well, she got it because she's a woman, right? Or, oh, she only got that promotion, or et cetera, because of her gender. And that hurts us all as a community. So I would say, achieve promotions, achieve salary on merit, and which is why I'm so big on upskilling and training, right? And the woman is there, right? Or your gender identity. Sometimes you're maybe a woman of color, or you're, bisexual or gay, whatever it might be, right? That should be how you identify with the community, because you are a role model to folks of that underrepresented group.
Yeah, and I think, companies or corporations also have a role to play. I can share that a few days ago here in Israel, we have a payment service that is called Paybox, right? It's very, very handy to transfer money to peers, to anyone you want, to organize, gift for the pupil in the class, in your children's class. And recently they launched a campaign where when you make a payment, before you click submit, they said, oh, we noticed the person you want to transfer the money to is a female. Would you like to reduce the amount by 30%? And that was kind of, the provocation, just to say, no, you don't, right? So why would you accept that, other people do that and pay women less than men? So I think there's, a lot more to be done in terms of messages and things that companies actually take a stand for. Okay, so I'm moving on to our next question, an anonymous one as well. And it's, while it's great to see a push for women in leadership, do you have concerns about women being selected for positions based on gender versus qualification and experience? That's kind of what you just talked about. And that's the danger, right? That's exactly what we don't want to happen.
Yeah, and there's a fine line, right? Because, on one hand, we're trying to strive for representation. And on the other hand, right, we as members of this underrepresented group don't want to feel like, oh, well, I think I might have just gotten the job because I'm a woman, right? Or because of my gender. Would I have gotten it if I were a man? You don't want to doubt yourself like that. Moreover, you don't want your peers or others in the community to doubt yourself like that. So, I'll tell you actually a recent scenario. So I was hiring for a friend in a company, in a startup company. And due to the current makeup of his board and his leadership team, he really wanted the chief product officer to be a female. And so, but given, again, the space that he's in, which is, hardcore kind of technical, right? There's not that many candidates. Not to say women can't do it. There's just not that many candidates, right? There's like 3. So with that said, right, that was like, great, interview all 3 and see, who is as qualified, right, as the non-represented candidates out there. And the reason for that exercise is we wanted to hold a standard bar across the women candidates and the majority candidates who happen to be, males, right, for this position. And we were able to, very fortunately, hire women for that role. Why? Because she had exactly the right qualifications and the same qualifications as her male counterparts. And sure, for representation, we wanted to promote her as a senior woman technical leader. And that's why she's the right person for the job. But again, notice how we did not sacrifice our standards or the quality bar just so that we could hire a woman for the role.
Yeah, that's very important. And transparency is important as well, because if you're transparent about the criteria, then there's no argument, right, on whether a person deserves or not the promotion. So yeah. Dina Zenik, the co-founder and managing partner of Captivate Collective, and another of our top 25 influencers, would like to know, looking back, what is something you wish you knew about being an empowered woman in the workplace that perhaps you didn't know when you first embarked on your professional career?
Sure. Take risks, right? My whole career, in fact, has been taking risks. For example, when I was transitioning from the US government, where I worked on large-scale networking systems, into Google, and I didn't even know what product was. What is a product manager, right? Product managers, I'm thinking, assembly lines, they're managing the product. Well, it's software, you can't really touch it. So yeah, I mean, what does that even mean? How do I be successful in a discipline or a job family that I didn't even know what it meant? Well, that took a leap of faith, right? Knowing that, even if you don't really know what it means, you can figure it out, or you can ask people, get advice, get mentors to figure it out. Likewise, right, my recent foray into more of the angel investing world or advising a venture capital firm. Well, I don't know sometimes if I'm making the right decision, right? Maybe it was a breakout company and I overlooked them. Who knows, right? But again, taking that risk and believing in yourself that even if you don't have the answer, that you have a way, a means to get to the right answer, right? That's a belief that will take you far, right? Because ultimately, you're the best person that you yourself can rely on, and trusting that person, having confidence in that person, that's really where I see a common theme among the most successful women that I know in tech.
Yeah, I think it's, yeah, the key is really about self-confidence, and also not being, sometimes, I see women who have such, again, just like you have such an impressive resume and background, and very easily, they, for a misstep, or they trip on the way and something happens, and they dismiss everything they've had, and the imposter syndrome kicks in, and it's so easy to kind of have that confidence a little bit shaken. And I think that's one of the things that we need to, coming back to education and to it's starting now, for younger generations as well, building that confidence, and during your whole career is actually something that, it's never a given, and it's something that you need to reinforce all the time. And I think, allyship can also help, because when you have a network of people who believe in you, then it's less, it's less easy to kind of fall back to that, misbelief into yourself. So I think
absolutely, that's why who you surround yourself is so important, right? And whether I'm going to steal a quote from Michelle Obama here, right? What she said, it's really important who you marry, right? And sure, I'll probably expand upon that. Partner, domestic partner, friends, it doesn't matter, right? Romantic, not romantic, but it truly matters who you surround yourself with, right? Who's your closest confidant? Because yeah, absolutely, right? I had a terrible review actually that last week, and I absolutely had imposter syndrome afterwards. Oh, am I the right person to put this initiative forward? Did I let my team down? But all of that came down to, okay, let's be realistic. What actually happened? And is there a possibility to recover? Right. And if you have the right folks around you to support you, to help you remember all the accomplishments that you've done in the past, well, that goes a long way, especially when, as a woman in tech, let's face it, right? The odds are against us. If you look at the numbers, they just are.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for that. I think, we'll try to end on a positive note, and we're reaching the 5 last minutes of our session today. We've got Sarah Schreiner, the client experience manager at ADP, asking, in a demanding workplace, what can I prioritize in my day-to-day actions, attitude, and focus to support my female peers? How can these actions support and inspire those around me? I love this question. It's such non-self-centered question. I love it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, every action counts, right? Like, I would say you don't need to start your own nonprofit, right, to make positive gains in this area. One of the things that we just talked about, right, is who we surround ourselves with. Because let's say you look over and your female colleague is having a bad day, like me, right, after a not so great review. Well, you can be there and be that voice of confidence, right? Reminding them how far they've come and how far they've achieved. So whether it's that, right, being there for your female colleagues, or for example, if you want to take more action and mentor someone. So for example, as you rise right through the ranks, extending your hand behind you and pulling up the next woman behind you, that's great, right? That's sponsorship. And frankly, that's more of what we need, especially as we see the tide turning, right? There are more women getting into tech leadership roles. Not enough, but more, right? And if all of those women can sponsor one or two other women to take their place of, the role as they move forward, then that creates this whole movement where we see, the rising tide, right, raises all ships. So be a part of the movement, whether it's mentoring or supporting a colleague or sponsoring, other women into your roles. That's a great way to start.
Thank you. And I think we actually have a live question from the audience. And so I don't know who is asking, it's anonymous. What are your recommendations for women who want to start a career in technology, but are in their 40s or their 50s?
Sure. In fact, a lot of some of the women that are coming through this program that I mentioned through the University of Pennsylvania, they happen to be in their 40s and they had a career that was not in tech. They've never had a degree in tech, right, or engineering. Obviously, that's one example, right, because they're specifically shooting to be a software engineer. Now, there are many other roles in tech that could leverage your existing skills, such as marketing, such as product operations, product management, support engineering, customer success. I mean, the list goes on and on, right? Or finance, right? Which is a completely different field. But they're all part of the technical world now, right? Every business is a technical enabled business. And so decide what industry you want to be a part of, what skills you already bring to the table, and you may not have to completely retool, right? And learn to be a software engineer, because that's not the only role that's available in tech. Actually, which is why the product management role has become so popular, right, among folks who want to get into tech, because sometimes, let's say, you're a product manager for a healthcare company. Well, if you're a former doctor or a nurse, that gives you a huge advantage in designing software, right, for healthcare customers, right, versus someone like me who doesn't come from a healthcare background. So think about what you already offer and what makes the most logical sense or next step for you in tech.
Yeah, absolutely. I think tech is intersecting with any industry today. So even if you come from, a psychology or an HR background, you can actually find your way into tech pretty, I wouldn't say easily, but there's a choice there. Well, I can't believe it, but we've reached the top of the hour, and although we started a tiny bit late, and I think we've covered all the questions that we had today for the session. So I really enjoyed it, and I would like to sincerely thank you very much, Nancy, for your time, your initiative, and for what you're doing with Awit. I can just hope that you'll give strength to a lot of people in our community. And again, thank you so much. And I hope we'll stay in touch and further that conversation.
Absolutely. Once a part of the Awit community, always a part of the community. So thank you so much, and really appreciate your support of Awit during this year's International Women's Day.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.